very serious injustice. It's not unique to the situation here, and there's a bigger fight, if you like, to be had, because at the heart of this case really is a police force who were responding to pressure, who were responding to a sort of a media frenzy about the killing of the first PSNI constable since the Good Friday Agreement, the same type of media frenzy that egged on the conviction of the Guildford Four and the Birmingham Six. Somebody had to be got for this, and sure, any old Republican will do. And if they're from the area, grand, sure, we might as well take them, and sure, that evidence is as good as anything else. And that really is what happened here. And sadly, that situation isn't just confined to Northern Ireland. I don't have time to go into it, but there's a very prominent case that hit the headlines, even though it's been going on for a long time, in the south over the past year, which is the case of Ian Bailey, who is an English journalist who lived in West Cork and who was, if you like, fingered, or the Gardaí decided that he was the responsible for the murder of French film director Sophie Toscan de Plantier in West Cork 18 years ago. They decided he was guilty, and then they went out to try and find the evidence to show that he was. And in that case as well, witness testimony was absolutely critical. Now, I think we should say that as early as 1976, witness testimony alone has been massively discredited. The whole area of the Devlin report recommended that nobody should ever be convicted only on eyewitness testimony. And in fact, we've had studies done now that with the increased use of CCTV and so on, that a lot more of such evidence is being used. But studies have been done that say at least a third of people, even in high definition CCTV footage, get it wrong in terms of their eyewitness testimony. So it's not reliable and credible evidence. Even if it were honest mistake, it's not credible. But we've seen the lack of credibility in the case of the Craigavon too, but similarly in the case of Ian Bailey, it was a lack of credible witness as well. One of the main witnesses was fitted up by the Gardaí, a drug addict who was given drugs and money to incriminate Ian Bailey. Another witness was a shopkeeper in the area who had testified that she'd seen a man acting suspiciously in the day before the murder. She was encouraged by the Gardaí to say that that person's description matched Ian Bailey's. Sometime after that, she was in an area, a remote area, with a man who wasn't her husband, saw the same man again and had a bit of a dilemma. Would she tell the guards and compromise herself, or what would she do? So she made an anonymous call and said she'd seen the same suspect again. They tracked her down, and because she was saying he was a completely different person than Ian Bailey, a much smaller man, they literally made that woman's life hell. So witness testimony and tampering with witness evidence is not confined to the North, but it is part of a bigger problem of how the state is organised and the lack of justice that takes place. I haven't got time to go into the details, but ironically enough, that case has been instrumental now, 18 years later, in unravelling a whole other side of Irish society. You now have a commission of inquiry into illegal tapes being held in Garda stations, prisoners' phone calls being tapped by the state and so on as a result of that case and some of the discovery that came out of legal documents in that case. So I suppose the point I'm trying to make is that there's no such thing as an individual miscarriage of justice. It isn't that. It's absolutely intrinsically linked with a far greater malaise inside the system itself. And sadly today, the victims of that are Brendan McConville and John Paul Wooten, but tomorrow it might be you or me. And that's really why we're all here now. I mean, I think I could be here all night, but I'm going to spare you that. What I will say is one of the key problems as well with this case, as far as I'm concerned, is the whole use of non-jury courts, which is increasingly a problem also in the South, with the extended use of the Special Criminal Court. And ironically, you've had the United Nations Human Rights Council periodic review in the last number of months, which absolutely slated Ireland in terms of its human rights record. But they have been on the record as saying there should be no special criminal court, there should be no non-jury trials anywhere. And I think all of us would agree with that. I've used cases before that we've been involved in the South of people just being incriminated on the basis of the belief of a senior Garda. No evidence whatsoever that they were guilty or involved in anything, but just a senior guard gets up and says, no, I believe that that person is a member of an illegal organisation, and that was enough to convict somebody for 5 years. That plus the fact that they said they weren't, so that was the final nail in the coffin, because the state said, well, they would say that, wouldn't they, because these fellas don't think that the organisations are illegal, so that clinched the argument, and that was basically it in those cases. I think we're all clear that there's never a justification for a non-jury trial, and that has been a factor in this case. I think a jury of 12 people, had they sat through even the bit that we heard in the day, there's no way that 12 ordinary people would have not upheld the appeal that was there. So I think that is a very sinister development, and I think it's a little bit ironic as well, isn't it? They talk about having to get rid of juries to protect witnesses, yet we know from this case and the Ian Bailey case, the only people who tamper with witnesses in the main are the guards or the PSNI anyway, so they have it both ways. You have that on the one hand, and then you say, oh, we'll take away the jury because the witnesses are being tampered with, so it's a kind of a win-win or a lose-lose for everybody else. And of course, where is it going to end up? You don't even bother with witnesses at all. She might as well not even bother letting the judge come in, let him go home and have a cup of tea, and she will just summarily execute people, and it'll be far easier and save us all a problem. And that's really, you know, where this is going, I suppose, if we don't make a stand. So, look, the only point I want to make is, I think it's to really register, because you know the details more than me, that this isn't just a battle for two individuals and their families, although it is that as well, and I fully respect that that is the case. It can seem like a very, very difficult battle, an uphill battle, when you make such a good case and then you're smacked down with the verdict. The state can seem all powerful, and ordinary people are left powerless and sort of dealt with in such a cruel manner. But that's why I do think the case of Ian Bailey is an important one, because while the negative side of that is that that case has been going on 18 years, and I'm not in any way advocating or hoping that this issue will go on for 18 years. I'm optimistic that we'll sort it out before that. But you have to look at it, it's always darkest before the dawn. Less than 12 months ago, myself and my colleague Mick Wallace invited Ian Bailey up to the Dáil to meet other TDs and parliamentarians about his case. I think 2 TDs out of, you know, over 200 TDs and senators turned up. In the hallway, we met Micheál Martin, the leader of Fianna Fáil, who happens to be in the constituency of Ian Bailey, and he bundles along, hello, I'm pleased to meet you. Micheál Martin could not get away from him quick enough. Nobody wanted to see him, nobody wanted to listen to him or his case, because if he were like he was out of favour. But subsequent to that, what emerged accidentally through a discovery legal challenge that he took in a case against the media for slander, documents emerged which showed very clearly, on the one hand, how he was fitted up, how the state covered up the fact that they knew he was fitted up, and also what emerged was a whole underbelly of surveillance that was operating in Garda stations, of people in prisons and so on. So one small thing can unravel and expose the whole system, and I think that is the message really that we want to give here today, that he went from very, very dark times when he thought he was going to be extradited back to France to be dealt with very severely, to being basically on the pig's back, not undone the injustice to him, but everybody knows that his name has been cleared. And really our task here today is to do that in a much, much shorter time, because what happens to an individual impacts on all of us. We've been armed and will be armed tonight with very good evidence as to why these men should not be in prison. So the choice is, do we just say, oh yeah, that's terrible, and go home and do nothing, or do we say, yes, okay, we're going to use that, and we will shoot that from the rooftops until people start listening to that, because you never know the moment when the little incident can trigger the whole deck of cards falling down. And the battle is never lost unless you stop fighting, and our task tonight is to encourage people who haven't been involved in that fight to get involved, and for all of us who have been involved to redouble our efforts, so that next year maybe something will happen and we'll be discussing somebody else's case or something more positive, because we'll have dealt this case a final blow.
much, Claire. Very interesting to listen to as always. We're going to open up the floor here for questions. You can direct your question to anybody on the panel. We have two family members here with Catherine Wooden and Damien McConville, Peggy Carty of the Justice for the Craigavon 2 Committee, plus Claire and John that you've already heard. So if anyone has a question, you're very welcome. Go ahead.
Hi, I'd like to ask John, you said that on the night that the guy made the phone call, that he was pretty much inebriated and that he had been welcome as his partner. What happened to the partner? Were they not questioned?
No, and it's a good question. He was drunk 11 months later when he contacted police. Despite the publicity around the murder, he didn't contact police in the 11 months after the murder. He waited one night until he was drunk. There was no corroboration by the partner, and I think that is very telling by its absence. So his statement, even though he was with somebody, was completely uncorroborated.
So did the defence call the partner and ask him?
No. The partner, once witness M engaged with police and gave his statement, he was taken into the witness protection scheme, as was his partner. As far as I'm aware, that is outside the jurisdiction, although I can't be certain of that, but obviously the defence have no idea where he is or where she is. All we are told is that she hasn't made a statement, and in the absence of knowing her name, in the absence of knowing what country she lives in, what city she lives in, or what address, we can't force her to come to court. And you're going on the working assumption that even if you were able to locate her and force her to come to court, given the fact that she now has a new life in the witness protection scheme, she's probably very unlikely to say anything that would undermine witness M. But no, she didn't. She did not provide a statement.
Thanks. My name's Jerry Carroll. I'm a local councillor for People Before Profit, and I've known about this case, from the start, but I've only been recently involved with the committee and the campaign team. I just want to offer my support in whatever way I can to help the campaign. I think I just want to make a couple of quick points if I can. And I think this matters, as Claire and people said. It matters for every sort of ex-prisoner, particularly in West Belfast and across the north. I think it also matters for anybody involved in protests, involved in campaigning against the the injustices which are being meted out across the world, be it Palestine or be it more issues more sort of close to home. I think this campaign and this point matters for everybody. And I think being involved in the Marianne Price campaign, I think that was something which was very successfully got across that this matters for everybody. Regardless of your politics, regardless of Marianne Price's politics, something that matters for everybody. And I think something that the campaign in Marianne Price's case did very well was to represent a broad sort of spectrum of opinion of people against what was happening to her. So I'm not saying that we haven't done that so far, but I think that's something we could look to and a successful campaign that we can look towards. So I sort of just have a couple of suggestions for maybe the panel. I think maybe in September, October, when the appeal, sorry?
Just in relation to the reference about the sentence, whether the sentence will be increased or not.
Okay, is that September?
Yeah, September.
I suggest we get a day of action, be it across the north or be it targeting Craigavon or Belfast, I don't know, but I'd just like to throw that out there. We'll have a day of action where we'll mobilise people to, first of all to talk about this issue, but also to get out in the streets about it. I think another sort of suggestion I'd like to throw out is we get a statement. And obviously Claire and other TDs have been really involved in it, but if we can get a statement, which we're sending around all political parties, north and south, all human rights organisations and community groups and whatever else, if we can get that and get a couple of, get a target of groups that we'll have and get that out to the papers, I think that would be a good way of trying to actually, push it more into the mainstream than it's been done so far.
Okay. Thanks very much, Claire.
It's just another question for John in regards to witness M. What credibility excuse did he give for not coming forward for 11 months? I mean, how did he explain that time delay?
He didn't really. He didn't, and the court ultimately put no weight on the fact that he didn't come forward for 11 months. What's also important which I failed to mention, was that he benefited financially from his arrangement by getting into the witness protection scheme. It came out in evidence during the trial that he had a house, had a wage, I think had a loan, an interest-free loan that was paid back over whenever it suited him to get a car in wherever it was that he was living now. And certainly it wasn't just a matter of him clearing his conscience and letting justice prevail where he was putting, you know, a very evil man behind bars. This is something which witness M very clearly benefited from. But why he waited 11 months, I don't know.
Yes. Can I ask about the morale of the two boys in prison, having gone through the appeal and having their emotion and family hopes all built up as to what the outcome would be, and especially for John Paul to be facing perhaps a longer sentence. The campaign itself, what effect does that have on their morale, knowing people outside the prison are not there? People who don't know them are the prison.
It's been,
For a reluctant speaker.
John Paul, it's been great that we have had the support, and it gives them a wee bit of hope that there is support and there is people that they're not able to do, that there's people out here helping them and trying to get things move forward to each wee stage. So we are grateful, the family, both families, and we're all very grateful for everybody's support, but it has been hard, particularly on Sharon, his mother, and Brendan's mother-in-law as well, and it's been a whole breakdown between families and relationships, so it's just trying to get to the next stage and hopefully we can get them home. So.
Anyone else? So, go ahead.
Yes, I think you might have dealt with it already, John. Witness Zaid, is he witness M's father?
Yes.
Okay, and you only touched on it already though, but was he arrested to try and get him to take back his evidence?
Well, the justification for the arrest is that the police believed that he had information and he had withheld that information and potentially perverted the course of justice. We were provided with the interview transcripts of those 10 interviews, which is certainly a hell of a lot of interviews for anybody to go through. Leaving aside the context of a murder investigation, the vast majority of offences, no matter how serious they are, dealt with in a couple of interviews. And even murder cases that I dealt with wouldn't go as high as 10 interviews. He was held, and he's an elderly man. He's certainly not young. He was held from a Friday until a Sunday, interviewed 10 times. Not one shred of evidence was put to him. And whilst the police will deny, they will say that they had reasonable suspicion that he was involved in a criminal offence and they were under a duty to arrest him and interview him. My own personal view and professional view as well is that it was very clearly designed to nobble the witness, designed to send a message to him and to send a message to anybody else. Don't mess with us. Don't involve yourself in this case. Move on, because we have a clear job to do, and that job is making sure that John Paul and stay behind bars.
Some of the recordings you mentioned as well, sorry, I didn't sort of get that.
There was recordings of witness Zaid with his family and friends in his house, in a house, where he was having conversations. Now those conversations that were, and they were very lengthy. It wasn't just 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there. There were a lot of recordings that involved witness Zaid speaking about the case, speaking about the approach from lawyers, and throughout any of that, not once was there a comment, an innuendo, anything which would lead you to believe that witness Zaid was making this up. Not once throughout all of this pressure that he was under once the police made themselves known to him, because they were putting him under pressure before they arrested him. That certainly wasn't the first time. Once the affidavit landed with the police and the Crown and the court, that's when the harassment started, and it escalated to the point where he was arrested. But not once throughout all of that time, and I know people have applauded witness Zaid for having the bravery to come forward. I would applaud witness Zaid for having the bravery to come forward despite what he went through, and for sticking with his story. He may have been annoyed with everything that faced him, whether it was police, whether it was lawyers, whether it was the fact that he had a son that was putting him through this. He had a lot of pressures going on, but not once did he ever deviate from the fact that his son was somebody who shouldn't be believed. And not only is he somebody who shouldn't be believed, but what he said in his evidence was not true.
family, at any time did, obviously they listen to the appeal and then listen to all the evidence, at any time did they sort of indicate that they might not believe that the two boys were guilty?
Sure.
Well, at one stage, Jerry Conlon stood with Kate Yard, and Jerry's passed now, so I think that gives me the right to say it in public, if he's living down. Jerry and Kate spoke after the bulk of the appeal was heard. Now, what I have to say is Kate Yard, during the trial, only turned up on the days that the prosecution evidence was being heard. So on the days when the defence case was being heard, Kate Yard wasn't there, so throughout the trial, she was across all the media outlets, not taken away from her grief or the hurt that she suffered, but she spoke in the media and that blanketed in the media anything that was being said, and she was only hearing one side, and that was the side that she was betraying to the media. Now, Jerry Conlon spoke with Kate, and Kate said to Jerry, and this is what Jerry told the group afterwards, I'm hearing things now that I never heard during the trial. And that indicated that she then didn't believe whether they were or were not guilty, but she still stood out on the steps of the appeal court afterwards and hurled the dismissal of the appeal as some sort of triumph. And I think the downplaying of that in the media afterwards showed that even the media had reservations about how the appeal court came to its judgment. Because being in the appeal court at the time, I heard BBC correspondents saying, I can't see how this can stand up.
So how you doing? Eugene Bradley. On a slightly different note, can anybody at the panel shed any light on why John Larkin suddenly overly concerned about the Lockgall massacre?
There'd be personal opinions, but I don't think this is the place or forum.
Maybe I'm reading it wrong, but I think he thinks he's Paul Donlan. She's trying to pull a rabbit out of the hat. I think the man's in trouble. The entire judicial system's in trouble. And this meeting confirms that tonight. Now, him calling for an investigation is one thing, but getting it, and I'm doing the hand movements like a magician, and getting it's two different things. You know, I think there's some sort of skullduggery going on there, and the man has found himself into some serious trouble, along with Barry McCrory. Now, I'm sick, short and tired of hearing these departments are independent and partial. My bowel is inexplicably linked to my backside. I'll show them people. The police, they're all joined up together, and this lady here, Claire Daly, I was at the last meeting Donegal Saturday a few months ago on a different note, and there were 3 other people that I want to take away from this campaign. But the girls in the paper today, this girl, Hazel Stewart,
Yes.
if they change a light bulb in Highbank Centre, her name's in a newspaper. Now there's somebody petrified of that woman getting out, and the judiciary do not like to admit they made a mistake. I don't know what role she played in that there.
Okay, can we just keep it to the Craigavon too? But thank you for your analogy. It was interesting to say the least. Okay, so I don't think there's any. Stephen Murney, last question of the...
John, what sort of time frame or how long do you think it'll take for the case to get to the Supreme Court or the next stage of it?
But the questions haven't been considered by the court yet, so I think first things first, they're going to deal with John Paul's sentence. They'll decide if and by how much that will increase. The questions had been submitted to the Court of Appeal. They had made comment that they would prefer a little bit of clarity on some of them in relation to both Brendan and John Paul. But with regards to meeting time limits and that, the questions are certainly in before the court. How long they will take before they consider them, I don't know. You know, we're waiting over 2 years from conviction before Brendan and John Paul got a decision on their appeal. So I think the judiciary and the criminal justice system has always went exceptionally slowly for John Paul and Brendan. How long they will take on this, I don't know. if that is unsuccessful, the Supreme Court are normally quicker in their response when you petition them directly. With regards to the CCRC, they will have a hell of a lot of work to do in this case because there's just so many. It's not a case that falls on one piece of evidence. There's so many different strands that I would say is unreliable that the CCRC would need to investigate and be seen to be investigating for such a high profile case. That might take a little bit longer.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Dee, go ahead.
Just a couple of points. Jerry's made the point there about day of action. On Sunday, there's an anti-internment parade taking place from our down right through the middle of Belfast up into Andersonstown. It was very well attended last year. I'm the chairperson of the Anti-Internment League. We use three definitions of internment. One is internment by remand. We've seen numerous Republican activists now being remanded on flimsy or no evidence. The charges then quietly dropped after they've been interned for a couple of years or they easily beat the charges. We'll have internment through revocation of licence with high profile cases in the past like Marion and Martin Quarry, and then obviously internment through miscarriage of justice, and the Craigavon 2 would certainly fall into that. The lads are innocent, they shouldn't be in jail. It's an attempt at building as broad-based campaign as possible. It includes Republicans, Socialists, human rights activists, community activists, legal professionals, and it's a genuine attempt to highlight an injustice that's happening not just here in the 6 counties, but in the 26 counties where a Garda above a certain rank can say you're a member of a subversive organisation and you can be convicted on that basis. Just like to encourage everyone here to attend it. It assembles at 12:30 on Sunday. We've tried our best in order to make it a broad-based campaign. We last year with 4,000 people. There is people conspicuous by their absence, and I think it would be remiss if no one mentioned maybe why they thought that was the case. There are people within our communities that, for want of a better term, like to portray the 6 county as a problem solved, that we live in a normal society, that we live in a society where if you support a certain party or certain system, that somehow remaining legacy issues are going to go away. Well, they're not legacy issues. Internment's not a legacy issue, it's a current issue. Miscarriages of justice are not legacy issues, they're current issues. And injustice is not a legacy issue, it's a current issue. And the people like that need to be honest, and they need to stand with the Wooden family, they need to stand with the McCampbell family, and they need to stop pretending that they're doing secret deals in back rooms to achieve what is unachievable in back rooms. They need to stand with those families, they need to stand with our families, and they need to stand with the people. They also need to stop issuing statements pretending that they're doing something, because you judge people by their actions, not by their words, and they've done absolutely nothing, in my opinion, to support either these 2 families or to support other prisoners. See, just in terms of the dip-black system, we were promised a new dispensation with policing. It's quite clear from this case, there's no new dispensation with policing. Barn McGrory's turned from a poacher to a gamekeeper. There's no new dispensation in the judiciary, and we still have a dip-black system where one man or one woman decides the fate of people, be it on no evidence or little evidence. And I know John's a legal professional, I think at times people like myself and others in this room, because we are termed as Republicans or as dissidents or as dissenters or whatever what way people want to term us, your words are taken with a pinch of salt when you're talking about injustice. And I definitely think it's time for legal professionals that are working on human rights cases that they got together and had their own campaign as legal professionals to try to abolish the dip-black system, because sometimes the weight of legal professionals carries a lot more than people like myself and other people in this room.
I'm going to call on Packy Carty now. Packy is an ex-prisoner himself and became friends with John Paul and Brendan when he was in McGarry with them, and since then he has campaigned religiously on their behalf. He's a member of the Justice for the Craigavon Committee, and he'll give you an idea of our campaign to date and what we hope in the future.
Well, first off, I suppose the campaign group and formed, it started with Willie McCampbell, Brandon's father. Sent him a small, he compiled as much material from the case as he could, because he didn't believe that his son or John Paul were guilty of what they said they were guilty of, and that they didn't belong in jail. And he started posting those information packs out to people. So at that time I was in jail along with John Paul and Brenton, and we sent information out that they had to try and help the campaign and get it off the ground. What we also done was, with the little time we had, getting out to the phone as we were in protest at the time, we phoned anybody we knew and asked, look, fall in behind the family here and see can you give them a hand, because these were just two ordinary people, you know, trying to do what they could, weren't activists, and had found themselves in this situation, similar to what Jerry had said earlier in the tape about how his mother must have felt when she first sat down to start writing letters, and that's where Jerry got that connection when he first met Willie and Eileen and Sharon. But we set out from the start that before the campaign group existed, and with both men firmly convicted and held McYabry, a Google search of Brendan McConville and John Paul Wotton or Stephen Carroll would have thrown up these images of Brendan and John Paul being put into PSNI vehicles, handcuffed, images from helicopters with people in forensic suits, and cop killers, murders. This was the general theme. This was how the public narrative of the case of Brendan McConville and John Paul Wotton was perceived by the public. We set out to change that, and we were very lucky early on that Jerry Conlon became involved in the case, because he became involved in the case and he says, I'm going to stand up here and speak my mind. And he was a small island in a very fast running stream. And the Irish News, a special thanks has to go out to Conley Young, who's here tonight, and has covered a lot of the Craigavon 2 work in the Irish News. Conlon's story was front page, and there was an audible shock almost from the establishment that someone like Jerry Conlon had come on board with the campaign, and that a paper with a reputation like the Irish News had made it front page news. We went from there very rapidly to lobbying all politicians. Anyone I could get an email address for was lobbied. Now, everyone at Stormont, everyone at Westminster, everyone in Leinster House all received that email. Now, very few came back. There was some interaction with the SDLP, some interaction with Sinn Féin, and very proactive relationship built up with the Oireachtas group, with Claire Daly and Eamon O'Keefe. So that was twofold. Our campaign was twofold. First, to change the public perception through PR, and one of our biggest weapons for that became social media, Facebook, Twitter, and the website. Very quickly the website was created, and as much information as possible about the campaign could be got on that. Now, we had a set time frame. We knew at some stage within the next year that an appeal was going to be heard, and we felt that if we could change public opinion and bring public pressure to bear and public scrutiny of the facts, because the case was so ridiculous. On paper, this case is ridiculous. Absolutely rotten to the core. What lies at the centre of this case isn't just the need for the state to scapegoat two Irish Republicans for the killing of a British police officer. What you probably have, and what my personal opinion of the case is that the British state instigated an incident that led to the death of a British police officer. And now, at all costs, MI5 and the PSNI are battening down the hatches. A political dictate, I believe, was handed down to the judges to come to the decision, because that decision is completely at odds with what happened in the appeal court. The campaign now, following that obvious setback, has to intensify. We've been very small, we've had very little funding. Any money or fund we've raised has been out of our own pockets. The money doesn't exist at the moment to reprint updated leaflets. That's how dire the situation is with us. It's a very, very small family and activist based group. And off the back of that, we have encouraged acts of solidarity from other groupings, from other peoples, from anyone who wanted to go out, hold a protest, hold up a placard, do anything in relation to the Craigavon 2, because that was a way for us to spread the word about the Craigavon 2. And there's no Stanley's complex here. There's no centralised control and command structure. If spontaneous protests and organised things like that pop up, we're more than happy to back it and publicise it, and we'll continue to do that. And it lets groups who release statements, groups such as Erigi, groups such as the Societies, groups such as the 32 County Sovereignty Movement and others, come on board, read the facts, come to their own analysis, put out a statement. We support those statements because they get out to it gets to a broader pool, people that we couldn't reach if we acted within the remit that we have or inside the confines that we have. So the appeal to feet is nothing new. Going from a legal perspective that John gave is not new. The Guildford 4 lost their appeal, the Birmingham 6 lost their appeal, and more recently Barry George, who was convicted for more than Jill Lando, lost 2 appeals. So there's a real reluctance on behalf of the state to acknowledge that they have done wrong. And the state here obviously is a lot more dark and twisted after 30 years of conflict. To intensify the campaign, we want to supplement the lobbying of politicians and the PR campaign, along with taking to the streets, and that would involve tying in with other groupings to do what Jerry has done. And we have a banner here made behind us that we're going to proudly display at the anti-internment rally on Sunday. We hope that everybody would turn out for that rally. It's purely on the issue of human rights. But what we have now coming up foremost as our next step, we had to think with very limited resources how we reach out to people, how we break, if you like, the hold that there is on the media. Now, social media has shown us, because it's one of our biggest stunts, almost 90% of the people we've reached with our campaign has been reached in social media. The advert for this event tonight was seen by almost 30,000 people on social media, so it gives you an idea of the reach that your message can get. So we looked at social media campaigns recently that had been very successful, and we centred on the idea of a song about the lads. I think it was Angela's idea. She says, you know, has anybody thought of a song? And we started thinking, we said, well, who could you get to do a song? And someone proposed Paul McAdam. Paul's here tonight. So I contacted Paul, and Paul more than willingly come on board. He asked questions about the lads, he read up on them, and he has written a song that he's going to play in a few moments. But what we want to do with that song, we thought, how can we use this song to reach as many people as possible? You could make a YouTube video and hope that somehow it went viral and that you would get the hits. And we looked at campaigns held by groups such as the Green Brigade, Celtic Supporters Against Criminalisation. And they successfully embarrassed the British establishment by putting the Irish Brigade song, The Roll of Honour, into the UK charts. I think it charted at 18 or 19. And that was to a concerted social media campaign to buy the song from iTunes, to buy the song from Google Play Store and other electronic outlets. So Paul has written a song. He's in the process of recording a version of that song. The Justice for Craigavon 2 group is going to release that song digitally through iTunes and through Google Play. And we need everyone here to download it. We need their family members to download it. We need you to text, email, get in touch with your friends on social media, tell them to download it. If we can get enough sales of the song, that song will go into the UK top 40. That means that every radio station that plays the charts in England will play the song about Brendan McCampbell and John Paul Wood. Now, you don't need hundreds of thousands to get a song into the charts anymore. The Green Brigade got the Roll of Honour song to number 18 with 11,000 sales. It's estimated that over the 4,000 sale mark, you can get a song in the UK top 40 and on every radio station in the UK. You can't buy that publicity. You can't buy the political counter-reaction that creates. It puts this case on miscarriages of justice firmly on the political agenda. It puts it on the public mindset and on the public agenda. So those are the sort of fresh, blue sky thinking that the group is involved in furthering this campaign, where it doesn't tie up a lot of resources. But it is activist based. It takes somebody to say, I'm disgusted by this, I'm going to spend 99p on that song. And that person then is part of that campaign. He's a figure in that number, in that chart, and helps to put that in the public domain. I'm going to wrap up now and pass you back to Angela.
I'm going to go straight from Packy to Paul, and this is the first time I've heard it. I've read the words, but this is the first time I've heard it, so I'm quite excited.
Just like to see the ink still drying, okay? It's literally just being completed tonight, so if I pick up or whatever, excuse me. Oh, don't worry, I'll be there enough as soon as I start.
Here's what I've got to say to you. Justice for the Craigavon too. Next time it could be me or you. That's a justice for the Craigavon too. Craigavon, the 9th of March, newsman read. Constable Stephen Carroll was shot dead. Police investigation soon began. They would stop at nothing to get their man. Here's what I've got to say to you. Justice for the Craigavon too. Next time it could be me or you. Let's have justice for the Craigavon too. McConville and Wooden got the blame. Since that day their lives have never been the same. The spooks are framed before they do it again. Let's we come together and break the chains. Here's what I've got to say to you. Justice for the Craigavon too. Next time it could be me or you. That's a justice for the Craigavon too. The trial of these two innocents was a sham. Justice without a jury was a scam. They produced a single witness with bad eyesight, and they claimed that he saw everything on that dark and rainy night. Here's what I've got to say to you. Justice for the Craigavon too. Next time it could be me or you. That's a justice for the Craigavon too. Witness Ed was the father of witness M. My son Sir Walter Biddy was his claim. And I specialist cross-examined said the same. That he couldn't have seen clearly in the dark and in the rain. Here's what I've got to say to you. Justice for the Craigavon too. Next time it could be me or you. That's a justice for the Craigavon too. Jerry Conlon, thank you and farewell. You're rotted 15 years in prison cell. Something that you have done. You led this campaign well so it wouldn't happen to another one. Here's what I've got to say to you. Justice for the Craigavon too. Next time it could be me or you. That's a justice for the Craigavon too. While the British injustice system does prevail, any one of us can be framed and sent to jail. The burning of 6 and the Guildford 4 are among the many of whom the Brits have done this kind of thing before. Here's what I've got to say to you. Justice for the Craigavon too. Next time it could be me or you. That's a justice for the Craigavon too. That's a justice for the Craigavon too.
Well, would you all buy that song? It's only 99p. We're hoping to launch it in September, and this is where you can make a real good contribution to this campaign. If it's all the only thing that you can do, everybody has a small part to play, as we know. This is how you do it. Thank you very much, Paul. He's rushing off now because he has to go to another event across the Devil. It's a fundraising night for the prisoners. The poor man never earns a penny when he's working for prisoners. Good luck. Thank you. Well, we're coming to the end here. I'd like once more to thank you very much for coming. It's really, there's many innocent people imprisoned in British jails, and some of them are for exceptionally long terms. And the reasons is that the police handling of these investigations and misconstruing evidence and actions of the suspects, or because faulty or misleading evidence was presented at the trial. This is what happened here. The evidence presented did not fit. There is no evidence linking either of these two men to this shooting. None. Our assumption, therefore, was that that mistake, we all believed in our heart that that mistake would be fixed when the appeal came. And that mistake would be corrected. And we were devastated at that. Tonight, I hope you have listened intently, that you have learned something, that you too believe, like we do, that this is two innocent men and this is the biggest miscarriage of justice in our time. And that if any of you want to help us in any way, we would welcome you with open arms. We are a small group, we are families, and we are friends of these two men. So we would be very happy to take friendship or suggestions like Jerry Carroll suggested, of how we can increase our campaign and how we could change it, make it more innovative in many ways. You know, we have lost many sleepless nights over this campaign and what has gone on with these lads. And let's be clear here, you know, Sharon Wooten lost her 17-year-old son, a boy, taken from his mother and put in jail. And at this moment in time, he has spent 5 years there. He's 23, still a young man. Now, if they increase his sentence, as they are looking to do, he will be a fully grown man, taken away from his mother and his other siblings and his other family members. How can we, as a nation of Irish people who have witnessed this type of things happening in our community, stand by and do nothing? Brendan McConville's mother and father, who are the most loveliest people I've ever met in my life. I quite fancy the father of these. He has a lovely smile and real smart. But, you know, they're in their 70s, let's be clear. Brendan McConville has 2 young sons. And if he does 25 years in prison, or if this Barra McCrory, rape, I can call him out there, gets what he wants and to increase their sentences to the maximum, these people will maybe never see their son having freedom again. Now, I ask you this, people, because this has to be the voice of the people. It has to be the part of the people to change this. We can't do it. We will provide you with the information. We will speak to any one of your groups, if you have groups. We will go the length and breadth of Ireland, America, Australia, Canada, anywhere to give the message about the innocence of these 2 men. I'm going to leave you with one thing here. One thing, and I want you all to think about it when you're going up that road. They're not your sons, but what if they were? What if they were?